cast doubt on long-standing prohibitions on the possessions of firearms by felons and the mentally ill. Just had an amendment for that. Or laws forbidding the carrying of firearms in sensitive places such as schools and government buildings. That was signed by Justices Antonin Scalia, Chief Justice John Roberts, Justice Kennedy, Clarence Thomas, and Samuel Alito. I want to thank Gabriela for taking the time to write this and to come and testify along with the other moms. Senator, in removing the license to carry, we're also going to be removing the background checks, the training requirement, the training class, the written exam, the shooting test, fingerprints, and checks on an individual's psychiatric condition or chemical dependency status. In exchange for what? All of this is extremely concerning. Mr. President and members, before we cast our votes today, I want you to ask yourselves, will passing this vote, will this protect our constituents? Will this make Texas safer? I think we can disagree on a number of items, and respectfully so. However, members, this is something so fundamental that we should not disagree on. Of course, we have a Second Amendment right. Members, I have been a gun owner my whole life. I understand. But the rights, such as the right of a woman to choose, or the right to a family, the right to marry, all continue to be chipped away at in this very building, on this very floor. And my concern here is that we continue to pick and choose which right is a fundamental right or an inalienable right. So when the Second Amendment right infringes on my family's right to pursue happiness, it's no longer acceptable. Many of you don't know this, but I have had a gun held to the back of my head. And I hope you never have to experience that. When I was a young man in a meeting working to provide for my family, there were some armed robbers who came in, and the door burst open and they had their guns. If we had had a gun, we would not have had time to pull it, or there would have been a shootout and somebody would have been dead. So, unless you've been in this situation, which I pray to God none of you are, I think it's hard to completely understand the trauma of gun violence. Members, this bill is not, in my opinion, a form of justice or liberty. Actually, it practically gives anyone an ability to carry, which in my opinion makes it irresponsible and creating a path for more gun violence. This is one of the reasons why the sheriff from Bexar County, Sheriff Javier Salazar, is against the bill. And I quote, because, I quote, "More guns on the streets in the hands of untrained, unidentified, and unlicensed people is not the answer to anything." I believe this is a bad precedent to follow, and if we're looking to other states, perhaps we should join them in their move towards expanding Medicaid, covering them for insurance, or the use of medical cannabis, or like so many other states that prohibit discrimination based on this sexual orientation or gender identity. Moreover, it's been mentioned that this bill is going to help women defend themselves from their abusers. However, the ability for more men to carry a gun is actually more dangerous for women in abusive relationships. A woman living with a gun in the home is 3 times more likely to be murdered than one with no gun in that same home. Lastly, if it's too expensive to have a license to carry, if $40 is too much, then maybe we should just give them free licenses to drive. It's just too easy. It's so much easier for us and our staff to be safe in this building. We know that people come through metal detectors. We know that they get interviewed by DPS. We know that they show their license to carry. We can also lock our doors. Are all of our constituents afforded those same protections? I don't believe they do. This body has been called by many the most deliberative political body in this state. And it's in some ways because we all represent nearly 1 million people. Those million constituents that we have don't all believe the same way. As a matter of fact, I believe that overwhelmingly, they don't want to see us pass this bill. Members, I will stand today with my constituents, with the students who have come to talk to us about this bill, with the moms who want to protect their children, and with all of those who have lost a loved one to gun violence. Hearing this debate on this floor can be traumatic for people who have been victims of gun violence. And I hope to God that what we do today does not result in a mistake that will have horrible consequences. And for that, Mr. President and members, I urge you to oppose this bill, which I believe will cause more harm than good. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Menendez. Senator Eckhart, to speak on the bill.
Thank you, sir. I rise in opposition to the bill. I used to prosecute domestic violence cases way back in the day. The suffering I saw and my often failed attempts to alleviate it and prevent it in the future haunt me to this day. House Bill 1927 will make it easier for criminal, violent, distraught, or mentally unstable abusers, like the ones I used to prosecute, to carry weapons with them nearly everywhere they go. One of the last cases I prosecuted is not unlike the hypothetical I discussed with Senator Schwertner. I'll just call them Bob and Mary. Bob and Mary, their marriage was falling apart, and they fought. Mary defended herself by cracking a vase over Bob's face. When the police arrived, Mary had no visible injury, but Bob did. Nevertheless, Bob admitted at the scene that they had fought and he had assaulted Mary. So Bob was arrested. During the course of the investigation, it came to light that Bob had no previous criminal history. And Mary said that she wanted to pursue a divorce and that she would be asking the family court for a protective order. Bob very much wanted to continue to be able to have visitation rights with their child. He had admitted at the scene to assaulting Mary, and so he admitted in writing to the assault, and he agreed to a deferred adjudication. 6 months later, in what Mary thought was an exchange of their child, Bob came to her place of work, to the parking garage, and attempted to kill her by shooting her. She escaped. But Bob got back in the car and shot and killed their child and then killed himself. I gave Bob a deferred adjudication. Our actions as representatives of the state, whether we're a prosecutor or we're a police officer or we are a senator, have consequences for Bob and for Mary and for their child. And for that reason, I would ask you to vote against this bill, because adding a gun-carrying loophole to the gun-purchasing loophole makes it even more difficult for law enforcement to know the good guys from the bad guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Blanco.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to respectfully speak against House Bill 1927. Members, on August 3rd, we've talked about this. 23 people were gunned down at a Walmart in El Paso. They were the target of a white supremacist who grabbed a gun, drove across the state to my city. And you all have heard me speak on this floor of that day's confusion,
We need a doctor, DPS. We need emergency. Tom? Members, would you step away for DPS, please, unless you're a doctor? Leave the doctors and DPS there. Members, we're just going to stand at ease for a few minutes. Members, we will continue. Senator Blanco, you were speaking.
Thank you, Mr. President. We wish our colleague a speedy recovery. Members, on August 3rd, 23 people were gunned down in my community in El Paso, and we've heard the stories of the tragic event from this floor. I spoke of the sadness, the confusion, the fear following the shooting, and we consoled one another. We were consoled by people across the state. Then weeks later, another mass shooting happened in Odessa. And in the aftermath of the shooting, Governor Abbott created the Texas Safety Commission. And the Senate and the House formed select committees to study gun violence and propose solutions to the public health crisis that we face. The recommendations made were designed to keep our communities safe. And those were my amendments today. Now, Senator Perry just offered a prayer just now, and it hit home. And as leaders, it's our responsibility to keep our people safe. And members, both the House and the Senate had hearings on the shootings. Many of us in this body went to Odessa, you went to El Paso to hear the devastating stories from those innocent victims that were impacted by those shootings. And we listened for hours. We listened 6 hours in Odessa. We listened for 6 hours in El Paso. We heard from Carla Byrne, whose brother Joe was murdered in front of his wife, in front of his kids, as they sat in a vehicle at a red light at an intersection. His life was taken just days after celebrating his father's birthday. It'd be the last time that his family had spent time together, laughing and enjoying their time together. We heard about the 37-year-old Ted McCloskey, who could make anything with his hands, very talented. How a longtime friend of his had invited him over to a Halloween party. He went and had a good time until the shooting started. And when things took a violent turn, we heard the story about how Ted used a paper towel holder to fight the shooter and save the lives of the people in the house, and Ted was shot and killed. One of our black leaders in El Paso, Pastor Michael Grady, we heard of the story of him learning of the shooting at Walmart and him driving to see if he could get a hold of his daughter, and he found his daughter in the parking lot, riddled with holes from bullets because of this shooter. We heard of the woman who pleaded with us for reforms in Odessa. In her words, if we can prevent even one more child from being murdered, if we can prevent one more father from not being murdered in front of his children, if we can prevent one more mother and father from burying their child, if we can prevent one more daughter from rolling up to her brother's grave to see her mother on her hands and knees digging in the mud so that her dead son might have flowers for the grave, isn't this worth all of our efforts? Now, this is the first session since the shootings at Walmart, since the shootings in Odessa, and we heard from our constituents that they want solutions. Just this year, there have been mass shootings in Palestine, in Houston, in Fort Worth, in Bryan, in Beaumont, in Allen, in San Antonio, in Dallas, in Austin, in Livingston, in Amarillo. Members, we need solutions. And this is what we come up with. Members, I'm opposed to this bill because it doesn't make us safer. Relaxing safety is not a solution. Members, we've got to advance reforms to protect our communities. Because if we don't, we can expect more. More violence, more senseless murder, more mass shootings. How many more lives? How many more lives have to be robbed? Of an individual seeing their daughter walk down the aisle, or seeing their son graduate from college, celebrating somebody's birthday. And this feels personal to me because I attended 23 funerals. And all I could do is offer a flag that was flown over the Capitol. And they send us here to fix these things. And all I can do is offer a flag and a condolence. We're better than this, members. So, my message to you is that we can do this. We deserve better solutions. And I just feel that permitless carry won't make our communities safer. So, members, I respectfully will be voting no on House Bill 1927. And I want to thank you for giving me some time to say a few words. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Gutierrez, speak on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Reality always has a way of setting in this place, in this building. And we all hope our friend is okay. And for those out there watching, our friend had an accident this weekend, and he's going to be all right, and I know that. But reality always has a strange way of setting into this building. And there's not one damn word I want to tell any of you that's going to convince you to vote against this bill. So thanks for listening, I suppose. And I'm sorry for what you have to do. I know some of you are very impassioned about this bill. And I know that at least 5 of you weren't so keen on it. I know that. But, 830,000 gun owners in this state, less than 3.5% of the population of Texas. And they're pretty loud, those 830,000. Boy, I got a lot of calls this week and last week and the week before. Imagine y'all got them too. But I'll tell you, if that isn't the tail wagging the dog, then I don't know what is. 3.5% of the population of Texas own guns. That's it. That's it. Maybe 40, 50,000 folks were calling us all week long for the last 2 weeks. But here we are, voting on a bill that is according to you, Chairman Schwertner, may not change a lot of things. I think it will. I think there's a lot of personal responsibility that we haven't seen in the past. And I think that you're expecting to see a whole heck of a lot of personal responsibility or lack thereof in the future. I was going to tell you a bunch of quotes about the Senate and what we're supposed to be in the Senate. I learned some time ago not to make personal attacks on people. I'm not going to do that. But I will suggest to you that James Madison said that the Senate was supposed to be the anchor. It was supposed to be the necessary fence, I got to read this part, against the fickleness and passion that tended to influence the attitudes of the general public and members of the House of Representatives. You didn't know, Senator Blanco, that we were part of the fickle public last session. But we'd get impassioned over there. Boy, we'd fight, literally sometimes fight. And we had to break you up from one because it was impassioned. We've all done it. For some of us that have been in the House, we get it. But over here, we're supposed to think things through a little bit more. We're supposed to say, hey, that's 3.5% of the population of Texas that wants us to do something. And that's just 3.5%. Law enforcement is saying, hell no. Our local police are saying, hell no. The sheriff's saying, hell no. I get it. My rural folks want it. I'm still a no. Some folks in rural, and hey, listen, you know, when you're out in Brewster County and you got some rattlesnake out there, you want that sidearm so you can shoot them down. I get all that. But at the end of the day, we are passing a bill for 3.5% of the population of Texas. I'm not going to bother you or bore you with all of those other